Hello and welcome everyone. Today, we are going to tell you the fabulous saga of Louis Vuitton, a young man who started life as a homeless person, before becoming the most prestigious luxury trunk maker on the planet. Let's get started. Louis Vuitton was born on August 4, 1821, in Anche, a tiny village of 148 inhabitants, lost in the middle of the wooded mountains of the Jura. Life was hard in this little hamlet cut off from everything, and the Vuitton family tried to survive as best they could against poverty, the harshness of the climate, and food shortages. As long as there was wood to burn in the fireplace, and vegetables to make soup, all was well. But alas, this was not the case every day, and the atmosphere in the old family cottage was rarely jovial and warm. Little Louis would thus spend the first years of his life in almost total destitution, and despite his parents' hard work, the family couldn't even feed themselves properly. Xavier, the father, was a jack of all trades, who worked when possible, as a miller, carpenter, or farmer. Corinne, the mother, was a hat maker and spent her days making hats or refurbishing old ones for a miserable salary. But despite their extreme poverty, little Louis felt rather well within his family, who, despite not being able to provide material comfort, showered him with love and attention. Little Louis thus lived quietly with his dear parents, and even if he didn't go to school and spent his days helping in the fields, he was rather happy. Unfortunately, the sudden death of his dear mother, taken by illness, deeply upset the young boy's entire existence. His father remarried very quickly, and it became apparent just as swiftly that his stepmother was a wicked witch who did everything to make his life miserable. Pushed to the brink by this despicable and cruel woman, little Louis, who was barely 13 years old, finally decided to leave his father's house, secretly promising himself to succeed in life and become a wealthy and respectable man. The young boy then undertook a long journey that would take him all the way to Paris, a journey of more than 400 kilometers which he had only his little feet to accomplish. Little Louis wandered for many years, without a penny in his pocket and with only an old, patched-up coat as protection against the cold. He walked on roads and trails in the morning and slept in the woods at night, often with an empty stomach. Having no money, the young boy made do with whatever the forest was willing to offer him. A few meager but tasty mushrooms, some chestnuts or walnuts gleaned from the ground, and berries, raspberries, blackberries, and wild strawberries. Little Louis sometimes stopped in villages, where he could offer his services to craftsmen in exchange for a small daily wage. Thus, he learned to shape metal with blacksmiths and to work wood with carpenters. Gradually, he acquired other skills, in stone carving with sculptors, but also and above all in the art of weaving and textiles. At the age of 16, Louis Vuitton finally arrived in Paris, after having traveled more than 400 kilometers on foot and visited hundreds of towns and villages. His long journey had lasted 3 years, but he had acquired along the way very valuable skills, which would certainly serve him in the capital. It is 1837, and Paris is in the midst of the Industrial Revolution, so a craftsman with nimble fingers was highly sought after. The young boy quickly found a position as an apprentice with Mr. Miracle, a respected trunk maker of the capital, who was charmed by his talent and quick wit. The old trunk maker then took him under his wing and taught him all the tricks of the trade, and young Louis would become one of the best craftsmen in Paris. Armed with his success and reputation, Louis Vuitton eventually left Mr. Miracle to start his own business, much to the latter's dismay. Louis then opened his own trunk shop on Rue Neuve des Capucines, where he counted more and more customers. For with the Industrial Revolution and the railway boom it generated, long-distance travel became much more frequent, and people would obviously need luggage to store their belongings. Travel trunks were therefore very sought-after items, and Louis Vuitton was accumulating orders, which he nonetheless treated with the utmost rigor. His talent was unmatched and was reflected not only in the beauty and aesthetics of the trunks he manufactured but also in all the innovations he introduced to them. Indeed, Louis Vuitton had noticed that the trunks and luggage fashionable at the time all had the unfortunate tendency to be domed on top. The ingenious trunk maker then had the very simple but oh so brilliant idea to manufacture completely flat trunks, making them easily stackable and practical for travelers. The durability and excellent craftsmanship of his luggage made Louis Vuitton one of the most famous craftsmen in the capital, and the echoes of his fame eventually reached the highest echelons of the state. Thus, in 1852, Louis Vuitton was officially appointed as the trunk maker for the toiletries of Empress Eugénie, the wife of Napoleon III. From then on, the artisan's glory and prestige transcended borders, and the trunks he made became true objects of desire among the wealthiest people in society. In 1859, trunks stamped with the Louis Vuitton brand were luxury items, and the company already had a good 20 full-time employees. Business was good for the young artisan with golden hands, who made a great deal of money from the sales of his custom-made trunks. The saga of Louis Vuitton continued in the following years with splendor and success until 1870 when, unfortunately, everything turned upside down for the young craftsman. That year was indeed that of the terrible Franco-Prussian War, and with it the exodus of hundreds of thousands of French people who fled their homes at the approach of the Prussian troops. At the end of the war, the refugees returning home found the dwellings in ruins or completely looted. This was also the case for Louis Vuitton and his family, who discovered upon their return that the workshop and the family house had been ransacked by the German soldiers. All the furniture, tools, and anything of value had been stolen, and most of the windows and doors of the buildings had been smashed. Yet, despite the despondency that had initially seized him, Louis Vuitton decided not to give up, and with a true winner's mentality, he undertook to rebuild everything from scratch. Admittedly, this was going to be extremely difficult, especially since he had to do everything without the help of the workers who had worked for him at the time, as most of them were either dead or lost because of the war. But despite all the difficulties he had to face, the indomitable Louis Vuitton managed to relaunch his company within just a few years. In 1885, Louis Vuitton became a registered and international brand, with the first store outside of France opening its doors on Oxford Street in London. It was followed by those in New York and then Philadelphia, the brand having immense success across the Atlantic. In 1888, trunks and luggage stamped with Louis Vuitton were so sought after and prestigious that counterfeits began to emerge here and there. Trunk makers without the fame of Louis decided to pass off the trunks and luggage as Louis Vuitton products. Many customers were thus deceived by these unscrupulous merchants, which greatly harmed the business. Louis Vuitton then devised a very simple but very effective method to combat all these fraudulent copies. He indeed adopted a new beige and brown checkerboard print with the inscription, marked Louis Vuitton Depose, which made his trunks and luggage recognizable among thousands. In the years that followed, Louis Vuitton's company continued to prosper, but age was catching up with Louis, who found it increasingly difficult to manage the manufacturing workshop. The old craftsman thus decided it was high time to introduce his son Georges to the business, so that he could one day take over and ensure the continuity and prosperity of the company. Unsurprisingly, Georges Vuitton proved to be as talented as his father, and very quickly, he acquired almost complete mastery of the art of making splendid luggage. Louis Vuitton was truly happy to see that his son had become an excellent craftsman, and especially that he had the makings and stature of a good clan leader. He could thus die happy, as the future of the family and the empire he had created with his own hands was finally secure. Thus, on February 27, 1892, Louis Vuitton passed away at the age of 70, surrounded by his family who had been at his bedside until the very last moments. The man who had been homeless before becoming the best trunk maker in the world left an empire to his son Georges, who would succeed him at the helm of the business. The young man would do his best to develop this precious legacy just as his father would have wanted to see during his lifetime. He spent long hours in the workshop without tiring, wanting to meticulously examine all the manufacturing steps, with the aim of delivering very high-quality products. Georges Vuitton would invent in 1896 the famous revolutionary monogram LV canvas, which would then become the emblem of the Louis Vuitton brand and a symbol for all the brand's aficionados. Recognizable among thousands, the trunks and other containers stamped Louis Vuitton are today synonymous with luxury and refinement. The Louis Vuitton empire, which is now part of billionaire Bernard Arnault's group, does not know crisis, and its net profits are constantly increasing year by year. The brand must still contend with Chinese counterfeits flooding the luxury market, which significantly harms its turnover and brand image. But the prestige that this brand offers its customers and especially the fabulous story behind its creation mean that Louis Vuitton will forever remain a symbol of luxury and refinement.